Welcome to Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul. I am Dr. Lottie and the host of this podcast. Today, I am so excited to introduce Olivia DeGennaro. And Olivia DeGennaro is a former TV news reporter, turner-astrologer. At her core, she's always been a storyteller. And after 7 years of working at local news stations along the West Coast, Olivia quit her job to take a leap of faith and create a new kind of morning show experience. Blending her love of spirituality and astrology with her production and communication skills, Olivia created The Spiritual Journalist. Through daily astrology forecasts and weekly conversations with inspiring guests, her goal is to build a community where you can join the conversation, ask questions, and provide insight. She aims to make all things spiritual a little more approachable and encourage your curiosity. So welcome, Olivia. It's such an honor to have you as a guest.
It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you used to be a news reporter. And so what led you to leave your job as a TV news reporter and start your own business as an astrologer and live stream host?
So many things, but I was working in TV news. That really felt like my calling for a long time. I've always loved to talk, and I've had this performer in me for a long time. I grew up dancing, so combining my love of telling stories and writing and speaking with kind of the performance aspect that TV news brings just felt like a natural fit. And I was in love with my job for a really long time. I attained my goal, if you will, of making it back home to my hometown of Sacramento, getting a job on air. And then I went through a dark night of the soul and just started tapping more into my own belief and spirituality. And I'm sure this is something a lot of your guests talk about, but when you start opening yourself up to the energetics of everything and the deeper meaning of everything, sometimes surface level stuff just doesn't cut it anymore. And I started to feel that working in TV news. I started to ask myself, like, does it really matter what I'm doing? And some days, yes, the stories I was reporting on felt really impactful and like they were helping people, but honestly, I just got really bored. I just wanted to do deeper dives into things and have really profound conversations with people. So I started getting more into astrology. I'd already been doing it more as a hobby, but I got this intuitive hit to start tweeting about the astrology transits every day. And so I did. I started tweeting about them. And in the same breath, it was the middle of the pandemic, and my partner had started getting really into live streams. He was investing in the cryptocurrency market, like so many people during that time, and watching all of these live streams about cryptocurrency. And he said to me, "You could host a live stream like this." But then I thought, yeah, I could, but what would I talk about? And then something just fell into place where I thought I could take my love of speaking and communicating to people and my knowledge of astrology and kind of help people in that way. And I'd been filling in on the weather wall at my news station I worked at. So I really loved the idea of like forecasting the astrology transits for the day. That's where my daily astrology live stream kind of came to be. And I also knew I loved deep conversations with people. So that's kind of where the weekly interview podcast component came in, and I let it ruminate. I was tweeting about the astrology transits every day to the point where my boss pulled me in and said, "Hey, you're not really tweeting and posting about local news. All you're posting about is astrology." And I just had to be honest and say, yeah, you're right. So the universe put a lot of things in place to give me the opportunity to leave and really take this leap. And it's been a little over a year now, and it's been so fulfilling, such a learning experience. I still have moments where I'm like, I can't believe I did that. But I've just realized that I am connecting so much more deeply with people doing what I'm doing now than I was working for a local news station.
I just love it because it's so inspiring for people to hear that, you took this leap of faith and you just put yourself out there. I'm going to make this work, and just follow that. And it's just like divine guidance, right? Interfering.
It
But that you
really
actually
was.
did it, right? You did it.
Yeah, exactly. There are still times that I think, I can't believe I did that. Like the stable corporate job with retirement and everything, saying goodbye to that is difficult, but I have so much more freedom now, and my ability to create what I want to create is, just it's wide open. I can do what I want to do with my time. If I get an idea, I can jump on it. So I am, a very creative person in that way. And I found myself over the past year creating a lot more than I bargained for, but it's been really awesome. And like you said, it was a lot of spiritual intuitive guidance before I even really knew what that guidance was. Even the name, the spiritual journalist, I was driving back from an assignment I was reporting on, and I'd been really into the holistic psychologist, listening to her podcasts, reading her book. And I was just thinking to myself, I love that name, the holistic psychologist. Like, you just get it. You get what she does. You don't have to figure it out. And then randomly it was like, you could call yourself the spiritual journalist. And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. Is that available? I looked it up. It's available. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So yeah.
I love it. It's such a great story. And so now you're working with astrology. How much can you find out about, who you are, where you're going, what you incarnated to do, and what is that? How much can you tell someone about who they are and where they're heading just by looking at their chart?
It's funny because every time I look at my own chart, I feel like I can discover something new. It's like an endless dive into myself, into my relationships, into other people. And long before I quit my job, when astrology was just starting to pique my interest years ago, all I knew was we have a sun sign. I'm a Virgo. That's what I thought the extent of astrology was. And, speaking of divine timing, I went to my friend's birthday party. And she lived in a different part of the state than me. So I went out there, I ran into her sister. We'd been childhood friends for a long time, and her sister had just taken this astrology course and started talking to me about different planets and placements. And I had no idea that you could have all these different energies in your chart. And so she started kind of pulling up my chart and explaining things to me. And then I was like, okay, I need to get to the bottom of this. I need to understand it. And I started applying the same thing to my parents. I started looking up their charts. And specifically with my mother, we don't have to get into our mother stories because that's a whole different podcast for another day. But it helped me see my parents and the people close to me just for who they are, rather than wondering, oh my gosh, why are they this way? And almost helped me release some resentment because I was able to just understand people better. And so from there, I just started unlocking deeper layers of astrology and of myself. And it's helped me give myself a lot more compassion, give other people a lot more compassion. And the deeper you go, the more there is to learn. So it's still a learning journey for me. And I am just sharing what I'm learning along the way and sharing what I know now. But there's so much you can tell about yourself. You can definitely tell your strong suits. You can tell maybe your blind spots or things you struggle with, areas of your life that might be more challenging, things that will come to you more easily. You might be able to tell who you're attracted to or what action style you take. So many things based on the different planets and their placements. And I always tell people your astrology chart is essentially a map of all the planets the moment you came into the world, with the center of the chart being you here on Earth and all the planets in the circle around the chart being where all the planets were. So it's not this like woo-woo esoteric coming from nowhere. It's actual science, tracking the planets in comparison to Earth. And that's always what I tell people who are skeptical. This is just a snapshot of the sky the moment you were born. And people for thousands of years have been studying the energies of these planets. And that's where all the sort of woo-woo esoteric information comes in.
So if you have, let's say somebody has a newborn child, could they get a reading from you and kind of get an idea what this child's temperament is like, or what they're going to be interested in?
Totally.
What could you tell about like a newborn infant just by looking at their chart?
I can tell so much, actually. And I love that I have become, for a lot of my friends, that person. Like the moment they give birth, they're like, okay, here's the time. Tell me everything about the baby, So one of my very best friends just had a baby earlier this year, and he has his moon conjunct Pisces, or excuse me, his moon conjunct Neptune in Pisces. And I told her, he's probably going to be really sensitive because children tend to exhibit their moon sign a little bit more than their sun sign for the first couple years of life, because kids are just balls of emotion and our moon represents our emotion. And so I told her he's probably going to be very sensitive, not just like emotionally, but maybe to medicines, or like he might have sensitive skin, but also Pisces energy is very sleepy. So I was like, he's going to be a great sleeper and he's going to dream a lot. He's probably going to have a really vivid imagination. And it's funny too, because that same baby, he's a double Gemini. So he has a Gemini sun and a Gemini rising. And he was a preemie, like 2 months premature. Even in the NICU, this kid was starting to babble and talk. Like his lungs weren't even fully developed and this kid is already talking. And I just joked, I'm like, yeah, he's a Gemini. He's going to be really chatty. He's already making noises. So that's been really fun. Another one of my friends had a baby during Leo season, and she asked me the day of, what's her chart look like. And it's funny because she's checked back in with me and said, so far, everything you told me about her has been true. So that's always fun. And I think it would be so cool if we got to a point where, when you had a baby, you just got handed a blueprint of your child. I think it would make parenting a lot easier for a lot of people, just to be able to work with your child's energy rather than, again, like I did with my parents, wondering, why are they this way? Why are they so sensitive? Why are they chatting all the time or so vocal? Or, it just helps us answer a lot of questions about ourselves.
So do you think that we sort of incarnate for having certain experiences because some of the things are in the chart, like our who we're going to become, their temperament? What do you think?
I think yes. I don't claim to have all the answers to the universe, but there are specific placements in our chart called the North and South Node. And our South Node represents the energy that we came into this life already mastering. You can kind of look at it like your past life. So often your South Node represents the people you're really comfortable around or the energy you're really comfortable in, but it's also the energy you're supposed to be moving away from. Whereas the North Node is always opposite the South Node, and that represents the energy you're here to embody, the lessons you're here to learn. It might be more uncomfortable for you, but the more you go through life, the more comfortable you will be in the energy of your North and South, or your North Node, and the more you'll be able to kind of leave behind your South Node. So I'm looking at your chart. Of course, I had to have your chart pulled up for this, and you have your North Node in Libra, which means your South Node is in Aries. So having a South Node in Aries for you, I would tell you during a reading, you might have lived a past life as an Aries, being a lot more assertive and aggressive, maybe even more masculine. Maybe you lived a past life as a man, and you were a warrior, having that more like warrior aggressive archetype. Whereas in this life, you're here to become a little bit more balanced, more soft, more diplomatic. And you might find yourself being more comfortable around those like fiery type of people, but the older you get, the more comfortable you get in your own skin, the easier it will be for you to be that peacemaker and that diplomat.
Yeah, it's so interesting, how you can tell about a person. And then, of course, I'm a Gemini, so I'm very chatty.
Yes, and you have a podcast, so it makes sense.
Right?
And I have a Gemini South node, so I love Geminis. I tend to be drawn to Geminis. I love being around them because I feel like we can bounce around from conversation to conversation. That's my jam, you know? So that's always a fun way of looking at it too. Like, who am I attracted to? Who am I drawn to? Who do I just feel really at home around? And it might be people who have a lot of placements in the same sign as your South node.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When I was young and I worked for IBM, I was in management training and things like that. And we would have to do different exercises, and they would see, who takes charge, who handles the situation this way and that way. And they kind of observe you to sort of figure out where you're heading with your career. And the one thing that I consistently got was, to some other student would describe, each person with one word: diplomat. I was the diplomat.
Really?
So it's really interesting that that is actually in my chart. So that's been an ongoing theme, I guess, for my life.
Yeah, and you have a lot of Libra energy in your chart. You're a Libra rising, you have a Libra moon, and your Jupiter in Libra. So you have dominant Libra energy, even though you're a Gemini sun, which makes sense that other people can see right off the bat that you have this very balanced diplomatic energy. And with Jupiter being there too, that's where your good fortune comes from, being able to be the peacemaker and find common ground between differing opinions.
That is definitely my life. Ask my kids, they would be like, yeah, that's my mom.
I love that.
So now that, okay, so if we're looking at the general population, is there a way that you could use astrology and say, like looking at a whole population, or is that something I have no idea. So that's why I'm asking you. Could you take the population of the United States is going through this kind of difficulties for the next 4 years or whatever, or the whole earth itself? Can you see things like that in the astrology?
Yes, you can. So something that I'm really passionate about is transit astrology, which is looking at where the planets are right now. And you can apply that to your own chart, but also just understanding the current energy. So I kind of play in two realms of astrology. There's so many different kinds of astrology, but understanding you, understanding yourself, your blueprint, and then also understanding what the planets are doing with each other every day and how that affects us. And on a generational level or a collective level, especially when we're talking about multiple years, we want to look at the planets that take multiple years to move around the sun. So challenges, I would say Saturn. Saturn is the planet of lessons, karma, limitations, boundaries. It's like that fatherly energy. And right now, Saturn is in Aquarius. Saturn takes 30 years to go around the sun. So it spends a good 2 to 3 years in each sign. And with Saturn in Aquarius, there have been a lot of challenges around technology, around community. Saturn moved into Aquarius right as the pandemic was starting. So we really became aware of the challenges of living in a giant network, right? And there was this sense of isolation and wanting to be around other people, technological innovations to be able to connect with other people. So that's just one of the planets you can look at. Pluto he's no longer a planet, but I still think Pluto's a planet in my heart, and we still consider him a major planet or a body in our solar system in astrology. And Pluto takes 250 years to go around the sun. So when we look at Pluto placements and Pluto transits, these are generational transits. So for example, you have Pluto in Leo, I believe. Yes, right at the end of Leo, actually. So everyone in your generation for, the 20 years before you were born, all has Pluto in Leo. And that's kind of like the generational beliefs you're born into. So we can look at different planets, especially these outer planets, these slow moving planets, to bring indications about cycles we'll be going through or long-term transits, long-term effects of things that we're feeling. Even Uranus and Taurus right now. Uranus is another one of those outer planets, and Uranus is the planet of disruption, change, and rebellion. Taurus is the sign that rules the physical earth. So you've noticed more and more over the past few years since Uranus moved into Taurus, we're all becoming more aware of ways that we are disrupting the earth. We're all trying to figure out innovative ways to save the earth. So Uranus and Taurus feels like, in a big way, the focus on climate change has been expanded because of this transit. So I could talk about this all day, but those are just some examples of ways we can look at the collective energies and like the bigger lessons we're learning right now. Actually, one more thing I want to mention, because once I get going about this stuff, it just comes through. Lilith, this is something that not a lot of people know about. Lilith, the black moon, is this point on the moon's orbit that's the farthest from Earth. But in astrology, Lilith is somewhat tied to the biblical story of Lilith. And if you're not familiar, Lilith was Adam's first wife, according to the Bible. They were created as equals, and then Lilith refused to submit to Adam, so she was cast aside. And for thousands of years now, many religious folk have really villainized Lilith as kind of this unruly woman. But in astrology, we're really reclaiming Lilith as this wild feminine power who refuses to be controlled, who refuses to submit, who knows her worth. And Lilith moved into Cancer earlier this year, right as the reproductive rights movement started really getting going. And Lilith, actually, as we're recording this, is harmonizing with the sun. And so we're looking at different ways around the world globally that women are rising up and reclaiming their power. For example, what's happening in Iran and the Middle East, and women around the world really banding together and supporting these causes. So that's another fun, maybe fun's not the right word, but powerful way that we're seeing astrology in action.
Fascinating. I mean, really, it's fascinating that you have that ability, because you understand astrology, to see how it's affecting everybody. I mean, everybody on Earth, we're all connected to each other. We're all part of the same thing. But it's fascinating to see the planets having all that meaning and impact on us, and just by moving the position. So I know that, something that a lot of people are familiar with is Mercury in retrograde.
Yes.
When is the next Mercury in retrograde going to happen, and what do we watch out for?
Well, you heard it here first. Mercury stations retrograde on December 29th. So it's coming up. It's happening right before the new year. And this is the most infamous transit, right? Everybody knows about Mercury retrograde. Mercury is the planet of communication and technology. So that's why we say during Mercury retrograde, you want to double check your text messages. You might have tech glitches. Maybe even arguments or communication mishaps can happen during Mercury retrograde. But all of the planets go retrograde pretty much every year. So Mercury retrograde has become this staple. Everybody knows about it, and it's like, oh gosh, is Mercury retrograde again? But currently Mars is retrograde. So retrogrades are not something to be feared. In my opinion, they're opportunities to slow down, because essentially what a retrograde is a planet appearing to move backwards from here on Earth. Remember, when we're talking about transit astrology, it's all from our vantage point here on Earth. Now, scientifically, we know that the planets don't just stop and start moving backwards, right? But it's all about our position. And so when planets are retrograde, they are appearing to move backwards in the night sky. And it's a great reminder, I think, of the fact that astrology started from humans on Earth tracking the stars, tracking the planets, tracking the night sky, and wondering, oh my gosh, that planet was moving forward. Why is it moving back now? So really, the planets are just a reflection of us in so many ways. And again, Mercury retrograde is not to be feared. If you're finding this podcast when it's coming out, Mars is retrograde too. It's just an opportunity to slow down. It's the dead of winter. It's a time to slow down anyway. And I don't know exactly. I don't have Mercury stationing direct on my chart here yet, but it'll just be a couple weeks of this slow down, just double check things, double cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure you have everything in order. And overall, don't freak out. Don't fear it. Welcome snags and slowdowns as learning opportunities instead.
Well, that's good to hear. Whenever Mercury goes into retrograde, there's always glitches, technical glitches, right? And you can just You just know you're going to have technical glitches, especially that day when
Mm-hmm.
it goes into retrograde, because I work a lot on the screen. So I just know. And it's just one after another, one client
Yeah.
after another, one patient after another. You're going to have, they can't connect. There's something wrong. The camera doesn't work. There's always something. And
I always
it's like
say,
clockwork.
yeah, it's helpful to know it's happening though, right? Because I think if you don't know what's happening, it's just super aggravating. Like, what is going on? You know, like, why is this happening? But knowing, okay, it's just Mercury. And the day it stations retrograde, it's almost like a pendulum. So when it's switching directions, you can almost imagine a pendulum switching directions, and it's like at a standstill in the sky for a moment. Mercury does not like to be at a standstill. Mercury is the fastest moving planet. It wants to keep going and moving and talking and gathering information. And that's why we tend to get those like tech glitches or weird things that happen specifically on the day that it switches directions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What about the moon? Now, a lot of people don't sleep well when there's a full moon. Is that because of our own chart? Are only some people affected, or is all people affected by the full moon?
There's a
Well,
lot of different
we know
answers
the
to this
crime rate
question.
goes up, right? Crime
We
rate goes
know
up.
humans are affected by the full moon. That's just, we know that. I always like to tell people who are a little bit curious or skeptical about the planets, astrology, all this stuff. All of the water on Earth is controlled by the moon. All of the tides on Earth are controlled by the moon. It's magnetism, right? It's this orbit. And so when we think of humans, we're made up of, what is it, 70% water? Why would all of the oceans on Earth be controlled by the moon, but the water in our own bodies not be controlled by the moon? So that's a really basic place to answer that question. Now, the moon's phases all have different meaning. A new moon, when it's darkest, it's the time to plant those seeds, set those intentions, and begin a new cycle. When we get to the first quarter moon, that's the time to start taking action. And the full moon marks this culmination point. Now, the moon is associated with our emotions, like I mentioned. So you can I use this example. The moon's phases are like a cup being filled. A new moon is an empty cup. You can fill it with anything you want. You can start anything new. But a full moon is like that cup being filled to the brim. And that cup represents our emotions. So it's like we're at this point where we're ready to spill over and release. And that's why we tend to have heightened emotions around the full moon. And then, of course, the light in the middle of the night can be disruptive to people's circadian rhythms. Just the emotional intensity in general, especially depending on what sign the moon is in, can definitely affect us in different ways. It's helpful to know where the moon is in your chart to know exactly how it's going to affect you, and also to know what moon phase you were born under, because if you were born under a full moon, you might love the energy of a full moon, but if you were born closer to a new moon, it might feel like a little much to you. So there's, again, so many layers you can get into with astrology. In general, though, that full moon energy is just heightened energy. It's just a lot of emotions that we're working with on a collective level.
So now I'm curious. Is there anything I should know about my moon in my chart?
Well, let me see. You have a Libra moon. Let me look up. I don't have here exactly what the moon phase was, but I can pull it up really quickly and tell you what phase you were born under. So you were born under a waxing gibbous moon. You were born right before a full moon, I believe. Is that correct? Hold on. I'm double checking. I'm all about the accuracy. I still have journalist in my name for a reason. So yes. Okay. Yes, you were born probably 5 or so days before a full moon. So a waxing gibbous phase is the time where we're gathering data, we're pulling in more information, we're kind of getting all the pieces together to get to that culmination point, and maybe even refining our vision a little bit. So when the moon is in its waxing gibbous phase, a few days before the full moon might be when you feel the most comfortable, or when you feel like a new cycle is actually starting for you. I always love to include the moon phase in people's readings, because I think the more information we have, the more empowering it can be, the more data it gives us to like reflect off of. So, for you, I would say that you're somebody who likes to take in information to refine your plans a lot, which makes sense. You know, you have all these books behind you on the shelf as we're recording here. But I think also the fact that you have a Libra moon, you know, you're somebody who really craves pleasure and feeling good and is really nurtured by your relationships. You crave balance, you crave aesthetic beauty. So there are multiple components we can look at when we look at where the moon is in your chart.
It's fascinating, because I mean, you're spot on. So it's very interesting. So what about if people are, people are falling in love? Is there a way to see if two people are compatible or not compatible?
Yes, there is. So there are two different kinds of charts we use for relationships. One is called a synastry chart, and it's essentially where we lay the two charts over each other and see how all the planets are connecting with each other. And the other is called a composite chart, and it's like the average of two charts. So it takes both charts and finds the average of each planet and the middle point between them. And both of those charts are really great at understanding how your energy blends or maybe doesn't blend with someone else's energy. My favorite astrologers, the Astro twins, they always say that there are no two signs that are incompatible. You know, there are challenging aspects, but they would never tell you like you can't be with this person because you're this sign. And I subscribe to that belief too. So I think when we're looking at compatibility in astrology, it's really helpful to just know where you might be facing more challenges in your relationship and where there might be more flow or where your strong suits are as a couple. And this isn't just about romance either. You know, this is great to do if you're in a long-term business partnership, to know how that person's energy connects with your energy. When it comes to astrology, it's really math. You know, it's not like this super crazy scientific process. It's literally just mapping the planets and looking at the geometric angles they're making to each other. So if two planets are making a right angle to each other, we call this a square, and there would be some tension there. There would be a challenge there. So for example, if my moon and your moon were squaring each other emotionally, we might have a hard time. We might butt heads. Oppositions can be the same. An opposition, of course, when two planets oppose each other, but it's more like a magnetic energy. So it can be that push-pull dynamic. Whereas if two of our planets were making a balanced angle, a 120-degree angle to each other, it would be like, oh, this just flows really easily, really nicely. We can really vibe in this way. And the same goes with a sextile, a 60-degree angle. It's a supportive angle. So your energy making a 60-degree connection from my energy would feel very supportive. So there's, again, so much we can dive into. Every time I look at my synastry chart with my partner, I learn something new or I have a new reflection. I always say the information you need to know will come to you when you need to know it. So sometimes I just pull up our chart for some guidance and see what's popping out to me in the moment.
That's really fascinating. I mean, it's such a great tool. Now think of people who have been married for a long time, let's say 30 years, and they feel stuck in their relationship. And one person is growing and changing a lot, but the other person doesn't change much and is kind of doing their same thing, eating their same cereal every morning. They're not, where the other person is wanting a different breakfast every single day, right? So there's just changes of how they're living their life. Is that because of their incarnation? Is like literally in their chart that one person will start growing and the other person is going to be more kind of stuck in their ways?
That's definitely a possibility. You're reminding me of a reading I did a few weeks back for a woman. I believe she was in her 50s. And we were joking because her husband is a Capricorn. My partner is also a Capricorn. And we were just kind of joking, like, yeah, he just wants to watch the same TV shows and be in his recliner and do his thing. And I just said, yeah, that's Capricorn energy. They like the stability. They don't like change. They're an earth sign. They want that security, right? Of just like being home and being in their protective little lair. I can't remember exactly what her main energy in her chart was, but she was more, opening herself up to spirituality. And I think, without therapizing her or giving her advice, it's just nice to know that's this person's energy. That's who they came here to be. That's not to say that people can't evolve and change, but that's just who he is. And it's okay to accept him that way. And I think acceptance is just a huge part of understanding our charts and other people's charts, because it allows us to stop trying to change people or wonder why or force them into being something that they're not, So I think, again, getting into other forms of astrology, you can look at your progressed planets, your progressed moon, your progressed sun. That shows you the progression of those energies in your life throughout the years. But in looking at basic natal charts, sometimes it's just coming into, this is who this person is, and that's who they're going to be. And it's also, going back to Capricorn energy, which is notoriously kind of a tough energy to work with for a lot of people. I have found that I am in this very expanded place in my life, as we talked about at the beginning, taking this leap of faith, starting something new. And it's made me appreciate the stability, what some people might consider kind of boring, of my Capricorn partner, because he's holding it down. He's going to be in his routine. He's going to be doing the same thing. And he's kind of the anchor that allows me to flutter about and start all these creative projects and do all these other things. So there's always a shadow and a light to every placement, to every transit. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to keep in mind when we are looking at people's charts. There is a positive aspect to everything, just as much as there might be a challenging aspect.
That's just, I mean, it's just amazing. It's such a great tool for so many things. Everybody that had a baby, relationship, new relationships, old relationships. I mean, it's just, you can learn so much about yourself and loved ones that you're interacting with just by pulling up their chart, and you get this whole different understanding. And like you mentioned, I think you mentioned your parents in the beginning, and who my parents, they're so aggravating, they're always this way, or right, but that's how they incarnated. If you look at, you were talking about how my whole generation, we all have, was it Pluto
in Leo? Yeah.
Pluto in Leo. If you look at the whole generation of Gen Z, what do you see there?
So millennials are Pluto in Scorpio. That would make most Gen Zers are going to have Pluto in Sagittarius. And Pluto's the planet of death and rebirth and transformation. So we're not quite seeing Pluto in Sagittarius coming into their own yet, or Gen Zers coming into their own yet. They're just starting to come up. I think we're really right now seeing the influence of millennials, because the millennial generation is starting to kind of take positions of power on and really come into their authority. So we're really feeling that Pluto and Scorpio generation right now. But Gen Z with Pluto and Sagittarius, this is a really interesting topic, because Sagittarius energy, we're going through Sagittarius season right now, or we just went through it. It's very expansive. It's all about growth, optimism, positivity, travel. So I think Gen Zers are going to have a different definition of freedom than maybe previous generations have, or maybe they're the generation that transforms what it means to be free, because Sagittarius energy is like that unbridled freedom, optimism, anything is possible. And Gen Z, a lot of Gen Zers, or I'm not one, but from what I see of them, they all have these like huge dreams, and they are ready to like expand and grow things. And I just think their generation is going to make leaps and bounds in ways that we can't really even understand yet. But I'm hoping Sagittarius energy is also associated with higher understanding and consciousness and belief. I'm really hoping that when this generation comes into their own, there will be this like massive awakening in understanding and belief. They're the first generation who grew up with unlimited access to technology. Millennials, we went through the creation of the internet. They were just born into it. So for Gen Zers, it feels like the possibilities are endless, and they might even manifestation. I think they're going to be master manifestors as well. Maybe they already are, because Sagittarius energy is very much associated with manifestation too. So they're kind of transforming all of our beliefs and the ability to manifest the life that we desire.
That sounds so hopeful.
That's
Right?
Sagittarius
I mean,
energy, that hope.
the world needs that. We're gonna save this planet.
Yes,
So,
please.
right. So what opportunities have presented themselves for you by, quitting your job and starting the spiritual journalist?
Well, so many. I mean, I've met amazing people just through the podcast, you included, so that has been one of the biggest blessings, just meeting people and making new connections. And even in our daily live streams, I've made friendships with people who live in other parts of the country. And we're really building this community where all these people talk to each other on the live stream daily, but they've never met in person and otherwise never would meet. So that's been a really amazing. But I've also noticed with not having a boss, just being able to kind of create what I want to create and do what I want to do, that my creativity has blossomed. I started about a year ago now. I was at a concert and I was dancing, and a man came up and tried to dance with me, and I was like, no, no, thank you, and I just had this thought like, ugh, I just want to dance with all women. And then I had this seed that was planted, like, it would be cool to start a women's dance night. 5 months later, our first goddess night out happened, and that's a business that I've started along with the spiritual journalist with my best friend. We host women's dance nights every month, and it's expanded to a women's community here in Sacramento. We're hoping to expand to other places soon too. So I say that just to demonstrate, like, I had no idea that was going to happen. I had no idea that making one decision to make a bet on myself and just see where the universe took me would open me up to all of these other creations and opportunities. And I keep joking because a lot of times I'll be pulling oracle cards, and I kept for months on end, I kept getting the same card, birthing new creations over and over again. And I kept laughing like, okay, universe, I'm done birthing. Like, I have too much going on. I have too many creations. But just being open has brought through so many awesome opportunities.
I love the story of how you pull the same card. I've been through the exact same thing. And you like, when is this gonna stop? It's the same card, and you shuffle it. It doesn't matter what you do, and you pick that one card and it's the same one. That's divine interference, right?
I
The spirit
know.
world is yelling at you saying, go here, do this.
And I just keep saying, okay, like, I'm open to it, but I'm only one person. I can only birth so much. Like, these things have to start sustaining themselves. I'd only have a limited capacity. So yeah, I think one of the last times I pulled that card was on 8/8 on the Lionsgate portal, and I was live, and I just had to laugh. I was like, oh my gosh, everyone, like, what? Okay, I'm open to it, but like, I'm tired. I'm tired here. I can't keep birthing.
So I know you do a lot of live stream. How come you chose to do it live stream?
Well, like a typical Virgo, I am a perfectionist. So being in TV news, working in that industry, I was live all the time on our morning show, and I got really comfortable being live. And I noticed in that role that when I would go to pre-record something, I would do it, take 10 times to do it to try to get it perfect. So I knew in creating astrology content, if I didn't do it live, it would take me 10 times as long. And even like when I'm recording a reel or something for Instagram, it takes me way longer than it would going live. So that's where it came from. But once I started doing the live stream and started kind of growing an audience, I realized that there's really a beautiful opportunity to co-create when you're live. So people ask questions or provide their insights. And I'm not this all-knowing being, a lot of times when people say, this is how I'm feeling, or this is how I see that energy, it lights something up in me and leads the stream in a new direction. So it went from sort of necessity of knowing that I would spend way too much time trying to edit myself to realizing the potential of having a live conversation with people and bringing their input in, and then also holding a space, because I think a lot of times people just need their emotions to be witnessed, and being able to do that through the live stream, through just commenting, feels safer for people than maybe being face to face or speaking things out loud. And I've just realized how much power there is in simply coming on the live stream and asking, how's everyone feeling today? And letting people just say, ugh, I've been restless today, or I'm feeling really good, or I'm kind of nervous, I have this big thing coming up. And then the community we're building, you start to hear people say, you've got this, and cheer each other on or hold space for other people. So I realized that it's building a community, not just a show that you're watching. You're actually part of it.
It's just, I mean, it's so great. It's just beautiful, all the work you're doing, and the dance nights, and bringing yourself to your audience. And it's so needed, that authenticity that you're bringing to your audience. It's just you and who you are, and your passion for astrology. And I think that is so needed in today's world, is that people just being finding their own passion in their own heart, and just going for it. And you're just the perfect example of somebody who just followed that passion.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
it's just wonderful. And what would you say is the biggest thing you have learned since you started the spiritual podcast, or the spiritual journalist?
That's a good question. The biggest thing I've learned is that a lot of times creations are going to take on a life of their own. If something is supposed to happen, it's going to happen. Just like that card pull incident we were talking about, like I had this idea for the spiritual journalist, and then it just kind of snowballed and took on a life of its own, and different opportunities presented themselves. Even Goddess Night Out, the dance nights I started, I created an Instagram account, and instantly it had like 50 followers, and I didn't post anything. So sometimes just trusting that little intuitive nudge that you get to start something, you never know where it's going to lead you. I don't know where the spiritual journalist is going to be in a year or 5 years from now, but I think the biggest thing has just been trusting in your passion, and in a little seed that comes through, a hopeful little seed that's like, maybe this could be something. Follow it and see where it takes you, and trust that the universe, God, spirit has your back, and you're feeling that passion for a reason.
That was beautiful advice for everybody who is listening. Just trust that interference, trust that guidance that you receive, and just follow it. Yeah. So everybody that's been listening, how can they find you? How can they work with you? How can they get a reading with you?
Well, thespiritualjournalist.com is my one-stop shop for everything that I'm doing. I do daily live streams with the astrology transits on YouTube. So you can just search The Spiritual Journalist and you'll see me, Olivia, pop up. That's free every day. So that's the easiest way to get involved with what I'm doing. You can also book a reading with me if you want one-on-one deep dive into your chart at thespiritualjournalist.com. And then in January, I'm actually starting my first ever group program. I don't even want to call it a program, because it's kind of just going to be like a group journaling course. It'll be $111 for the whole month. And I'll teach you a really basic understanding of how to read your own chart, and then how to track the movement of the planets through your chart. So you can take the information I forecast every day and apply it to yourself, and understand how it's specifically affecting you. And that will have journal prompts, and then we'll meet once a week and over Zoom and just talk about how the energy is feeling. It's going to be really fun. We already have lots of people signed up, so I'm really excited for that. And yeah, Instagram is the best way to connect with me though. And that's just at Olivia DeGennaro, or you can just search The Spiritual Journalist on Instagram and you should be able to find me.
Wow, that's great. So if you go to, so it's thespiritualjournalist.com.
Yes.
And I will put that link in the podcast notes as well, so people can just click on that and go. And you have that class is also listed on your website. That's how you sign up.
Just click on the shop button, thespiritualjournalist.com/shop. It's the first thing that will pop up.
And to schedule a reading, they go to the website too. Is there a place where they can just schedule, or they have to email you separately, or?
Yep, it's all through my website. So it's just thespiritualjournalist.com/readings. Super easy.
And then they can see dates and prices that are available.
Exactly. And there's
Oh, that's
tons of different
perfect.
kinds of readings that I offer too. So if you want to understand, like we were talking about your relationship with another person, we can do that. I also have a reading where I look at the current energy and how it's affecting you. So many options, so many ways we can work together. Like I said, the past year, all these creations have just been coming through. So you can see the physical manifestation of all of them on my website.
I just love it. So everybody go check out her website. And I want to thank you, Olivia, so much for being a guest on the podcast today. It's been an honor to have you share all your knowledge with the audience. It was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I just love your energy, and yeah, it's an honor to be here.